niche is too niche. I've had podcasters ask me if it would be bad to narrow down their topic. Because in their mind, they want to reach a wide audience, so they want to go broad. They try to encompass all sorts of people and topics into their show. I would argue, though, especially with podcasting, the more you can niche down and narrow who you want to speak to, the more your listener is going to be as passionate as you are. Those are the type of listeners you want. You don't want every single person who is a podcast listener. I mean, that would be great, right? But we're all unique people. We don't all have the same interests. The ones that are willing to go down that journey with you and just be as nerdy or dedicated to the topic like you are the listeners that you want for your show. Case in point, Susan Thompson. She co-hosts a very niche podcast called The Voices of the Ancestors. It's a podcast about the journey of Georgian songs. Georgian as in not in the state, but the country. And this podcast is for lovers of Georgian polyphonic songs from a female point of view. And that is very, very, very niche. And even with this type of strong focus, there's never a shortage of episode ideas. Susan's going to share with you their podcasting journey from that initial very steep learning curve, the years of podcasting that they've been doing. So they've had lots of trial and error, and how this very unique topic gave them an awesome opportunity. Well, not just an awesome opportunity, it happened multiple times where they get to share their deeply loved subject of Georgian folk songs, and you'll hear all about that unique benefit of hosting a podcast. This is episode 113 with Susan Thompson on the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. So let's go. Susan, thank you so much for being my little last-minute guest, as podcasting happens sometimes in life and all of that. Thank you so much for coming on the show with me.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here, Mary. It's a lovely adventure.
I love how the internet just connects two strangers together like this.
Absolutely. It's just serendipity. I just happened to be looking at a phone, doing the aimless scrolling, going, oh, Mary Chan needs a guest. I could be a guest.
Yeah, you could definitely, because, as you said to me, you've been podcasting for 4 to 5 years. You have a lovely co-host, Holly. I want to know the whole story. So let's just start right at the very beginning. What was that spark that made you decide that you even wanted to start this thing called podcasting?
So, that thing that starts with a C, the COVID thing, which,
yes.
It brought lots of, but it also brought some great stuff, We were drawn together through our shared passion for Georgian folk singing. So we both enjoy singing this music from Georgia, the country, not the state. We'd been working together to try and pull together a theatre piece, which was going pretty well. And we'd given a performance and we'd got some development work. And then suddenly COVID, and it was like, theatre is just not happening. What can we do? And a friend of Holly's said to her, you should be doing a podcast. And so we were having this conversation, and she said, do you fancy doing a podcast together? And at this stage, I have told her this since, but I kind of went, I have no idea what a podcast is.
Right. I knew that was going to be my question for you.
I said yes. I just went, yes, I do. I wonder what that means.
Without even knowing. You were just like, let's do this?
Yeah. I wasn't a podcast listener. It was just such a weird, crazy time. It was just like, then we talked about it a bit. And, once I'd worked out what it was, like, I actually went, really, yes, this sounds like a great idea. It's like, we can do this thing. Because one of the things some people said to us very early on is whatever, if you're going to go into podcasting, pick something that you'll be happy to talk about for years and years and years. So Holly's my co-host, and she's much younger than I am. So she's in her early 30s. I'm in my early 60s. And I was like, look, I've been talking about Georgian folk singing for like 20, 30 years already. I'm not going to fall out of love with it. I have so much to say. It's fine. And over the time we've been doing the podcast together, actually, Holly's sort of developed her career and done training and now teaches choirs. So
oh, wow.
Things change.
Yeah, definitely. But in that very beginning, did you have any hesitation? It doesn't sound like you did.
Not Oh, no, absolutely not. It was like, yeah, let's do this thing. This is a great idea, And one of the key things, we had a great supporter, Jen, in the States. And she teaches actually deaf children, and was into podcasts and Georgian singing, because this community of Georgian singers, they're very widespread. There's all sorts of people that have found this music and gone, oh my gosh, this touches my soul. That I just need to know more about that and do that. So we were in touch with Jen, and there's this whole community of Georgian singers all around the world who were kind of talking to each other online, because you couldn't do anything else, going, I really miss being in a room with real people and singing. This is torture. So, and she was just great. She kind of went, yes, you should do this. And yes, I'll be your first guest. I'll be your guinea pig. You can try it out on me. And she was so encouraging. She really, really helped us get started. And she gave us some really good advice as well, actually, because I think she'd done a lot more audio work than we had at that stage. But also working with the deaf community, she was really passionate about things being accessible. So she kind of went, yes, you are going to do a transcript right from the get-go. It's like, oh, okay, Jen, yes, we are.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been great.
What were some of the other pieces of advice that you took to heart from her?
I think not to be afraid of following our passion, because it really, it's a niche. It's the niche of a niche. It's not just this particular form of music from this very small country in the Caucasus. We made the decision right at the beginning that we wanted to follow the women folk singers. And that was just because it's a very patriarchal society. And when I'd started sort of 20, 30 years ago, to get to hear women singing was really hard. There were any number of records, there would be then, not even CDs, of male groups, male ensembles. And there was been very few male ensembles that had travelled to the UK. And it was literally like, well, this is a lovely song, and I really value you teaching it me, lovely male folk singer. But what does a woman sound like when she sings in Georgian? I just had no idea of what quality the sound would be, whether it was really strong and big or whether it was soft and ethereal. I just needed to hear a woman singing. So yeah, we kind of went, okay, well, let's make our job shining a light on the women.
I wonder too, just because of the society and culture, how much do women voices get airtime, essentially, in that culture?
In that culture, they do get airtime. It's a very televisual culture. So people will frequently, be on TV and be having interviews on TV, and their ensembles will be invited onto TV. But if you look through all the groups that are singing, and I've had the pleasure of spending time in Georgia with Caroline Bithell, who's a professor at Manchester University, and who was writing a book about the folk singers in Georgia and the whole scene and how it developed. And that was just so useful to sort of kind of swap notes with her, because she would go to a lot of the same concerts I'd go to, or I'd go to one she'd missed, so I'd send her a recording and vice versa. And between us, we kind of went, well, it seems to me that about 2/3 of the sort of public ensembles are either male or mixed male and female, and about 1/3 are female, which is, it's kind of understandable in that sort of society, because women have a lot to do. They raise families and they go out to work generally.
Yeah, exactly. You were saying too to me in that time before we were recording, also that you were dabbling in video. How do you feel is important showcasing the faces of these women as well?
I noticed that people respond to faces. So we always try and have a face on the cover of each episode. So although we mostly haven't done a video episode, because I also have a YouTube channel, which when I'm in Georgia and I've been to concerts, I video the concerts and upload them to there. And because the concerts I generally choose to go to are those that the women singers are going to be in,
yeah.
I feel that, their performances and their faces, that's where they're going, rather than into the podcast directly.
Oh, I guess too that you can hear the performance,
Yeah.
in their voice. You don't need the video portion of it. Do you feel like you want to dabble more into video? What's that like for you?
I think the straight answer is no. We've come to that conclusion because most of the time we've worked within the audio sphere. And when we're putting an episode together, they're quite different, I guess, because although we might do a guest interview style, that's one style, but then we also do audio journeys, and that's a sort of a different sort of a style. But generally speaking, we're often having to go back through things to make it understandable for a more global audience. So you're talking to somebody about a very niche subject, and they just think, entirely understandably, that everybody knows what Krimanchuli is, or, they'll refer to something which makes perfect sense to them. Sometimes I understand as well, but sometimes I'm going, what? And so we find with the audio, you can go back and you can do a voiceover and go, so Krimanchuli is this yodel style that is particular to this region. And, you can give a bit of a context so it makes the rest of what the person's saying just much more understandable. And that doesn't work in video.
No, it doesn't. And if it does, it's a lot more extra work to get the video piece as well as the audio voiceover and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, I can imagine that too, like from this recording, your most recent episode with the Easter trip.
Yeah.
That was amazing to hear. And I feel like I was there with you.
Oh, I'm so
already,
glad.
Just because of the audio background, right? You have the cars in the background when you just stopped over on the side of the road and you were talking about, we've got sandwiches here. And I just happened to be eating my morning toast with bread too. So I was like, I felt like I was eating my bread toast with you and your sandwiches. So, I don't think I would have that feeling if I was watching a YouTube video, because that visual piece doesn't immerse you in it, where the theater of the mind does so much.
Yeah, and I think if I would think about trying to do that particular trip, this video, it brings me out in this cold sweat. Because we were invited on that trip, and we literally didn't know what we were going to. We got this lovely invitation by a great friend of ours who leads an ensemble. So Magda Kevrishvili, and she leads an ensemble, Mityebi and a Meri Meri. And she kind of went, do you want to come on this trip with us for Easter? And both Holly and I looked at each other and went, but it's not Easter. It's the Sunday after Easter. Oh, no, it's still Easter. And we were like, what? It's like, I'll explain on the trip she's going. And, even when we got in the car, we didn't know where we were driving to. So the sort of planning you'd need to try and do a video episode and get a camera in the right place and be able to catch the sound as well as the visuals. And trying to edit it together. And also because it was a mixed group of ages, if you felt that there were certain children that wouldn't want to be shown, or adults for that matter, because sometimes, in villages you might come across adults who are terribly shy and reserved and don't want to be on film. That just, it feels too, just doesn't feel right. Whereas somehow the audio just feels much more approachable for people. They're much less freaked out by a microphone somehow.
So what kind of tech did you bring with you? Did you even know? You were just like, I don't know, we'll just bring this, hope it works. What was that like?
It's actually reasonably unusual nowadays that both Holly and I are traveling at the same time. But on that occasion, I brought a handheld recorder. So I have a Tascam, which is just so great because you can operate it with one hand. And then we both brought phones. And I can't remember if Holly, we have had another recorder that's been great, but actually it'd been great until it wasn't great. You know how tech works really reliably and then stops? I think it had decided to stop, so that didn't come with us that day. But we knew we'd got one recorder and two phones to record with. So, we hoped that would be enough. And it was, so that's great.
Wow. That's also a lot of audio to sift through and edit because, your show had so many pieces, not even just that particular episode, but just your show in general, right? Weaving in the women's voices, the traditional songs, things like that. And I sort of feel like, okay, there's voice, there's audio already, but were you nervous about the tech side, the recording and editing?
I'm always nervous about the recording side because it's that fear of what if the battery goes flat? What if it just doesn't record for whatever reason? And that's happened to both Holly and myself. And so we always try and take 2 recordings of everything. I mean, just like today when you set up, you went, right, I'm going to press that and press that. I need, I've got a checklist of things to do. So yes, I've been sort of like 8 hours drive out of the capital city up a mountain, knowing I wanted to do a recording and having asked the people if it was okay to do it. And I was there for a week, and every day it was like, we can do the recording today. Oh, no, there's this happening. We'll do it tomorrow. And it was like the final day, and we were leaving in like an hour and a half. And it was like, oh, we're going to do it now, are we? Oh, okay. I'll unpack. Where's my recorder? Took the recorder. I think I was using Lavalier mics, and I got a friend there who'd also got some great recording kit. And I just went, will you just record this as well? Because, I've got one shot at this, and we don't get it. We don't get it.
Yeah.
We started the interview. They basically turned up in full traditional dress with their instruments, kind of almost prepared to give us a performance. So they started with a song, and I'd put Lavaliers on people, and I looked down and went, that is not happening. Nothing is happening. This machine has got batteries in.
Oh.
But what had happened was the Lavalier's batteries were flat, and there was no light on that particular tech that told me they were flat or not flat. And it was just like, the minute I got home, I sold them. It's like, I don't want anything to do with them anymore. So I was just so grateful to my friend who was there with the recording kit and recorded it all, because otherwise it would have been a disaster.
Wow. And then the editing part, now that you have this all recorded, what's the editing like?
So the editing I hand over to Holly. That's the sound editing for sure, because in the early days, we were on this really steep learning curve. And I found the other day, I found a sort of like a cartoon I'd drawn of a really steep learning curve with us at the bottom. It's like particularly vertical. And we just went, right, well, every day is a school day. What are we learning today? And we both kind of tried everything. And I did try looking at Audacity and various editing software. And I just went, this is just not my thing. This makes me so anxious and so wound up. And it's like, if this doesn't make you feel like that, Holly, would you do that side of it? I'm happy to, do social media and, the transcript. And there are things that I can do that are fine. They're my things. But audio editing is not my thing.
And how did she take that? Was she like all gung-ho or also nervous?
I think in the early days, partly because it was COVID and it was that weird time when
you could sit around and learn and do things.
Exactly. You kind of had time. And so it didn't seem to, she was up for the learning curve and doing it. And I think she seems to have the mind that can follow that, whereas I just get so cross and wound up by it. So she was okay with that. We had that very upfront conversation. It's like, you do that, I'll do other stuff. And that was fine. But there are definitely times when, life gets in the way and things get very busy. And we both know that when you go into that sort of editing headspace, you kind of need a block of time to be in it, because just putting it down and picking it up is a nightmare. You just spend the whole time going, now, where was I? What had I done? And so as life has changed for her and her career's developed, being able to have that dedicated time it hasn't come up quite so often. And we have dabbled with other things. So as well as, we have worked with someone to do a video episode, which was, I'm really glad we did it, but, I don't think we'll be doing that too often. But we've also worked with other audio editors. And each time it's been an interesting experience, and we've definitely both learned things from it. But often what we learn is, I don't know, we've been doing this that long now that we both kind of get what we both think about how the shape of an episode and a story should be without having to go into long explanations. And if you're working with somebody else, it just takes longer.
Yeah, it's that initial part of, okay, now I have to explain all of this and explain this.
Yeah.
And it feels like it'll just be faster if I did it.
Yeah, exactly. And, we've done it with someone who, with Annalie, who's travelled in Georgia, and that was really helpful, who's also a singer. So they were definitely on the same sort of wavelength. So that was great. But then, we've also used somebody that had never been to the country and isn't a singer. And it was like, oh gosh, there's so many things you take for granted when you're working in such a niche that you just don't realise.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a second language that you've learned.
Yeah. We know what's easiest, not necessarily that always works best, what's easiest if we work together on it, and Holly does all the editing. So that last episode where we travelled through the village, because we were both on that trip together, at the end of it, Holly kind of went, I'm going to regret this, but I'm the best person to edit this. And I just went, yes, you are.
sounds like such a natural fit between you and Holly, like not just the co-host, but like, yeah, the editing side and figuring out, okay, who does what tasks. But like any relationship, I'm sure you two have grown as well. Co-hosting, what was some of the most challenging pieces when you were working together?
I think we both find it quite challenging. You know, that thing about talking over each other. And it's a really fine line in a podcast. You want something to flow and you want it to be natural, but also you don't want the listener to be struggling to work out who they're listening to. Particularly when you're traveling and you're going to visit families or singers in mountains, you know, it's really exciting. We both get really excited. So the temptation to talk and react and be therefore talking over each other, you know, that's something I think we both had to just be a bit more measured about than we would if we weren't creating a podcast.
And we were talking about like life and things and people grow and things like that. So like, where are you at now with the podcast, having been working on it for the past 4 to 5 years? Do you feel like there's a lull or do you still have that same passion to continue to create episodes?
It's funny. We keep flip-flopping, I would say. So there's parts of us that like, oh, how many years have we been doing this? And you look at series 1 and series 2 and all the different people we've interviewed. And that just feels really good. And also knowing that we know that students in universities use the archive and listen to the podcast and look at the transcripts all around the world. So ethnomusicologists and other people. So we really want to keep that. So we've got a real desire to maintain the website, to maintain that so it's available to people going forward. So there's and maintenance is boring, isn't it? You know, it's not really very exciting, but we really value our sponsors and our supporters because they're, you know, those people that give us some money regularly. That's what that enables, you know, for us to pay those boring subscriptions so that we can keep it available and free, you know, because we don't want students having to pay to listen to a podcast. That's ridiculous. Also, it kind of so goes against what we first set out to do, which is like shine a light on the women's voices. It's like, you know, I want everybody to be able to hear this. You know, it's made such an impact on me. And if I'd never heard a Georgian song, gosh, my life would have been so different. Yeah. So in terms of ideas for more episodes, you know, I keep a list and it gets longer rather than shorter. I mean, there is no shortage of ideas. I sometimes say to Holly, you know, when she's kind of going, oh, well, I've got to do this and that and the other. And how do I fit this in? And, you know, will there be a space of time to put an episode together? And when will we both in Georgia at the same time? And things like that. And it's like, well, yeah, but you never know. If we suddenly got 10 new donors who were subscribers and just gave us a little bit every month, suddenly we'd be able to set aside the time to make that episode, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yes, we would. And so, you know, you can always hold out the hope because you just don't know who you're going to touch and, you know, who will hear it and be moved and go, actually, you know, this has really made a difference to me to be able to hear this. And I want other people to be able to.
Yeah. And I feel like, too, that a lot of podcasters, I mean, this is just an industry as a whole. It's hard to get that feedback, right? Like, and when you do get feedback, you're like, oh, yes, this is the gold mine, the one person who's finally written in. So how are you getting feedback?
That's so funny you say that because, like I said, we started in that theatre world and people being, you know, in the same room at the same time. Right. And, you know, and we both thrive on that immediate feedback. So to suddenly go into this podcast world where you put an episode out and sometimes you don't hear anything from anybody for months and possibly even years. And then occasionally we'll be at a live event and somebody will come up to us and say, oh, I'm in Belgium. I've just got into Georgian singing. I've just found your podcast. I just listened to this episode. Thank you for doing it. And it's just so amazing. So sometimes our feedback is face-to-face and live. Sometimes the feedback is, you know, the social media stuff. It's on Facebook, it's on WhatsApp, it's on SoundCloud itself, because there's a comments function there. Yeah, it's quite varied, but it is sparse. So, which is why, you know, whenever somebody writes something, I just cut and paste it and I put it in a document because, you know, those days when you're a bit low and you're feeling, oh, why am I doing this? Because life is so busy and there's so many other things. Sometimes I literally read those out to Holly down the phone and go, so Holly, I think you need to hear some of our listener feedback today. Let's just read these out.
That is such a great idea. And I mean to do that. And then I never do. Or they're all over the place, right? They could be on one social media platform, or maybe you got an
Yeah,
email, or maybe you got that. And then you're like,
exactly.
okay, so
Exactly.
you've got like a little document. Do you just like, you
Oh,
cut and
yeah.
paste and you,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So this last episode where we went with these groups of singers and we walked around this village and we learned about what a live Easter actually is, and we blessed the village and we sang, and I've had lovely feedback after that. And somebody went, so yes, and a bit like you, I really felt like I was in the village with you. Yeah. But that's unusual to get feedback so quickly and so directly.
I also love the fact that you were talking earlier about how a lot of the feedback is face to face. And it's so true. Like,
Yeah.
I've heard from so many people where, as one example, they're a coach, they podcast for their business, and then they went to a conference and they were just talking to somebody else. And then somebody from behind her like ran up to her, tapped her on the shoulder and was like, "Are you so-and-so? I recognize your voice.
Yes.
Are you the one from the podcast?" And she was like, "What? Huh? Who?
Yeah.
Me? Yes, it is. But what?"
Yes. Yeah. It's quite a surprise when that happens, but it does happen.
Yeah. And that's why I think podcasting is so unique because it's asynchronous, right? We are in our worlds as a listener, listening to your show. And yeah, we might be like, "Oh, yeah, I really love that." But how often as a listener too, like, do you actually go and make that comment, find the email address or however it is that you send that feedback? So it's so great I find that if you can tie your podcast into some live version of it, or even just put out on social media, like, "I'm going to be at so-and-so event. Will you be there?" And just connect in real life with these people and have like your theater experience, right? Get that feedback in the moment.
Yeah. No, it is invaluable. And I guess that's it's not all why, but some reason we presented to quite a lot of universities. I think it's partly because it's a subject that gets studied, sort of ethnomusicology. So, in the context of world music, Georgian will be one line of study for people. So we went to Cremona, we went to Italy to present in a couple of weeks. In fact, I think the day your podcast comes out, we'll be in London presenting at UCL. There's a whole conference dedicated to the memory of Nino Calandadze. And she's somebody we created a memorial episode about after her death, just because she'd been such an interesting figure. She'd done so much, and she'd been so central to all the singers that I knew. They, when Nino died, because I was in Georgia at that time, there was just such a sense of loss, and not just a loss of a lovely person, but a loss of her depth of knowledge about folk singing in Georgia, and the sort of the places she'd been to and the songs that she'd researched, and combined with a really modest personality. So she didn't have that big showy personality at all. She had a very shy, very modest personality. And yet she'd achieved so much. So like I say, I think the day your podcast comes out, Holly and I will be in London presenting at a conference that's dedicated to her memory. And we'll be there and being able to tell the audience about this episode we made, also dedicated to her memory.
Oh, that is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful tie-in to what you do and your show. And did you ever imagine this was a possibility when you first started?
No. Definitely not.
So then what did you feel like success would look like in the beginning?
It's funny. Holly said something to me last week. So she's teaching groups Georgian songs, and she's doing one-off workshops. And we were just sort of chatting. We were getting this presentation ready, and we always have to answer the question, why do you concentrate on the women? And I sort of went back to, well, when I first started, all I could find were the men. And she said, "Do you know what?" She said, "I think that's changed." She said, "People now say to me, I can find the women's groups more easily." And it's like, perhaps all those years of you putting YouTube videos up, Susan, has started to make a difference, that combined with the podcast.
Wow.
And we were like, really? Has that really happened?
Yes, I bet. Because a podcast has no boundaries, right? Anybody can access it. And so you're helping with that representation side of things. Wow.
Yeah, and I think because it's an English language podcast and we really work hard to, like I say, to produce transcripts and to label things and link things, that it's all in the English language, which is so much more searchable and findable if you're another English language speaker, because Georgian's really not a well-known language.
Right.
It's lovely, but really hard. So just the effect of putting it out there in the English language, and so it's more searchable and more findable, has had an effect. And one of the things I notice is that Georgian ensembles, I've kind of come across them and go, why haven't you got a website? And it's like, oh, I see. In Georgia, paying for a website, it's so much more expensive. Much of the communication happens on Facebook, not just social family communication, but business communication. So, businesses will run everything through their Facebook. It's a different culture. It's a different way of doing it. But, if you're sat in the UK thinking you can Google it, you ain't going to find it, or you weren't going to.
What about the future then? Like you realize looking back now what impact you've had in this community. What's the future going to look like for you? What are your hopes?
I always say I've got 2 girls and they're in their 30s. But, if I was talking to them, I'd go, don't curtail your hopes and dreams. So I try and say that to myself. And it's like, well, what is my hope for the podcast? And it's like, I know that there are women singing in villages up mountains that don't come down to the capital city and perform on the stage. But I know that they've got so much to share. And the title, Voices of the Ancestors, one of the things we do in each episode is we ask, if it's a guest episode, we ask the guest, what does Voices of the Ancestors mean to you? And the range of responses has been really varied. And if you're speaking with a Georgian, then sometimes they will answer with a very family, direct, it means something about my grandmother or my great-grandmother. But then, we've asked that question of singers from other cultures who've gone, well, I don't have a direct lineage to Georgian in my family, but that Voices of the Ancestors, can mean such a broad range of things to people. So to be able to ask that question of the more remote singers and to be able to solve the translation issue. My Georgian is not up to translating. Holly has much better Georgian than I do, but the skill of being a translator I'm so in awe of people to be able to do it in the moment, to read the nuance of the person that you're speaking with and to be that person between us asking questions and the person we're interviewing and not get in the way for the audience. Because, as an audience, I want the audience to hear the person that we're interviewing or the person we're singing with more than me or more than Holly and more than the translator. So I'd love to be able to solve that. We've done episodes with lovely people who've translated, and once it was absolutely on the hoof, I found myself up a mountain with people and with somebody who has, English Georgian parentage, but hadn't spent that much time in Georgia. But I kind of went, this is too good an opportunity to miss. This Patty Tepladze, she's just awesome. And I would love to be able to ask just even a few simple questions. And she said, oh, I'll help, I'll do what I can. And she did, she's not a trained translator and she just stepped in. And from that moment, there was just this gem. She did ask her for me, what does Voices of the Ancestors mean to you? If I just give you a context, we must have driven for, I don't know, let's say 5 hours up a mountain. Then we got out and then we walked along a path through the snow for about another 30, 40 minutes before we got to our destination. So it was remote and it was a farmstead with cows and fields and things. So when she asked Patty this question, the answer came back. And, to start with, I thought, are you translating? Is this really right? And what Patty was basically saying was she sort of Voices of the Ancestors meant to her the plot in the corner of her farmstead where all her ancestors were buried. They were buried at her farm. And she had this feeling of just being responsible to her ancestors for how she lived her life, for how her children lived their lives, for passing on her love of music. Yeah, and it was just so immediate and personal in a way that I can't imagine ever getting that answer from somebody I was interviewing in the UK. I'm so grateful to Anna, who was willing to risk, being an interpreter in the moment. That was, it was a great risk she took, and I'm so glad she went for it.
Susan, I have had such a blast chatting with you. We can go on forever, I think.
I know.
And maybe that's just, what podcasters do. We all love to talk. We share such great stories.
Yeah.
And so we've gone from the past, we've gone future. I want to go more present right now in this moment.
Okay.
What excites you about podcasting right now in this moment?
Part of it is I've still got that passion to share the experiences that I've been lucky enough to have. There are people that I know have perhaps traveled to Georgia once and their health isn't good and they're not able to get back there. So to be able to share with them something that they love and give them a way of accessing it still, that feels like a great privilege. I'm also sort of, I like spreadsheets. I'm so sorry, but I do.
Don't apologize for that. Spreadsheets are,
But I think part of my brain that likes spreadsheets actually likes the business side of it. I spent this morning talking about the marketing and the social media side, and just thinking through that, how to share it with other people using social media, and how to gently but directly propose that we're on Patreon, we're on Ko-fi, and how, if I don't say that, they won't know that. So how would they know that it would be really useful? And how excited Holly and I get when somebody buys us a Ko-fi. It's got this idea of, well, if you stumbled across this in a cafe wrestling with the editing of one of these episodes, you'd probably be really happy to buy us a coffee or a mint tea and help that creative process. And so when somebody does, and it comes in and, you see it on your laptop, it's like, oh wow, this is so great. It really, and it's a bit like you say, when you get some feedback on an episode, it has the same sort of feeling. It's like, thank you, you've made a difference.
Yes, that's right, though. You do have to say things a few times, especially in the audio world, in order for things to click. So go buy Susan a coffee.
Thank you. Yeah, Holly takes the mint tea. I'm the coffee person.
Susan, thank you so much for joining me. I had an amazing time. And I think, if you're ever on this side of the world or I'm ever over there, we'll have to physically buy that coffee or mint tea. I'll take the mint tea as well.
Will you? Okay. Well, I would love that, Mary, and keep doing what you're doing, because I keep, I've looked through your great long list of titles and I think, I need to dip into that one. I need to dip into that one. So I'm going to be a listener.
Oh, thank you.
No worries.
I love how she says every day is a learning day. I so agree with that. It's so true, especially in podcasting, because so many creators like you didn't know something when you started, right? Everybody has a learning curve. You kind of have to go all in and just try and test things out and try it. Otherwise, you'd never create anything. It's like art. It's very iterative. You try one thing and then you try something else. The first piece of art you might be proud of, but as you keep learning and growing, you might look back at that one and go, ooh, what was I thinking when I did that? It's the same with podcasting. And then through this iterative art of podcasting that you get to do, you get opportunities for things outside of that medium, but still related to podcasting, like traveling to speak about the topic that you are already so passionate about. People tend to forget how much a podcast is your very own calling card. You don't need a speaker reel and then cold call people or submit your speaker application to an event you want to be on. Podcasting already gives you an outlet to reach these very specific fans of your topic, and you're applying to speak without even realizing that you're applying. They hear you on your episode, on your podcast, and already understand how you are an expert in your field and invite you to events naturally. Or you submit your speaker application and they hear your podcast and it becomes such an easy yes for them. It never, ever surprises me to hear this when it happens, yet it's easily forgotten about in the industry when podcasters are talking about success. They always think about monetization or download numbers because that's what the industry is talking about, and that's how a lot of people gauge what success looked like at the very early stages of this industry, but things evolve. And now this very tangible opportunity to talk about your subject on a different platform, traveling somewhere to speak about your podcast topic. It's a huge, huge success. We need to showcase more. So thank you to Susan for coming on the show. I loved her energy. I hope you learned a lot from her journey as well for your own podcasting journey. I'm so glad that the internet put us together because honestly, I just put out a random LinkedIn post and she was the first to reply. And I loved her energy, so match made in heaven. You know, Susan talked a bit about recording on location in the mountains. So in the next episode, I want to expand on that practicality of recording, you know, whether you are in person or online, but especially online because that is the most common way to record these days. Whether you have an interview or not, there are some things that are universal to all podcast recordings. I recently had a client who wanted to launch a podcast and he asked, why are headphones important? He didn't really understand why. Like, he saw them a lot now, especially with video podcasting. He saw if there was a microphone, and then now when you see headphones on someone, it means it's a podcast. But why headphones? Why do you have to wear them? So I'll dive into the technical aspects on why headphones are crucial for any kind of podcast recording and how to use them or get around them if you feel, I know some people say they're uncomfortable or they're cumbersome or, you know, it messes up with their hair, or you don't like the visual aspect of wearing headphones, especially on video podcasts. So we'll dive into all the reasons of why headphones are important when you're recording your show. That's next time on the podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you'd share it with a podcasting friend. And to reveal more voicing and podcasting tips, click on over to visiblevoicepodcast.com. Until next time.